Welcome to the virtual lunch. Today is Friday, August 27th, and this is virtual lunch number 379. Our guest today is Eugene Shim, who's the Vice President of Sales for BRYTER, and this is part of our continuing series on no code in legal, thanks to our friends at BRYTER. Eugene, how are you?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
I'm looking forward to it. So tell us about your background and your role at BRYTER. I just want to acknowledge that you too are an alum of Boston University, and I really appreciate that. I'm excited to talk about this, but I'm glad that we have you on today and would love to hear a little bit about your background.
I like to say I'm the sales guy. I made a career of being in sales almost accidentally. So what I wasn't is I want to grow up to be a salesperson. Dennis has chatted in here. Everyone is a salesperson. I ran into that quite early in my career, largely talking to customers with my salespeople and saying, gosh, my perception of sales as being like, knock, knock, you really want to buy this? No, really, you do. But when I learned there was a business conversation and an ability to really find mutual alignment, it was something that excited me. And fast forward close to 30 years, it's what I've done in some capacity. My gamut has been doing the big thing and the small thing. And I oversaw a significant portion of NASDAQ. Most people think of as a stock market, rightfully so. But NASDAQ also has a portfolio of SaaS services. A lot of the BoardVantage, MarketWired, big acquisitions. People know them by brand and they say, oh, I didn't know that was NASDAQ. Yes, it was. So they've accumulated this business. I had about 300 people globally in my organization, and it was a tremendous ride until we sold some of that to private equity, Blackstone. At that point, I got into the world of automation, and I oversaw US sales as well as our global ecosystem for a company called Mendex, which is also owned by Siemens, a large German company that Michael Group obviously knows well, but all of you know who Siemens is. And it's really moving towards an area that is rapidly growing. The need to digitize is certainly something COVID has even accelerated, as we know, the past couple of years. Experts who have the knowledge in between their ears to ultimately interpret something, right? Or translate something and come out with an action. Certainly lawyers would fall into there. And how can they digitize, automate, accelerate what is largely a manual and repetitive process? So joined, couldn't be happier to be here. I started early this year. My role is to oversee sales, but the better adjective is build something here. We're all building. The way that I try to break it down, and while there certainly are differences, including obvious being the larger companies people know, and there's a level of, when talking to a prospect or a customer, of awareness, whether that perception is correct or not, people generally know or have an idea, they think of what you do. So that's the biggest difference is, again, it's the legal tech world is relatively small. So I'm surprised when I started here that a lot of people did know BRYTER, but suffice to say Thomson Reuters, the company I was with many years ago, but we don't have the recognition. So that's one key difference. However, I would say a lot of it's similar. And what's similar is that you need to understand the business. You need to be a quick learner, a good listener, and ultimately find out ways that I talked about earlier, finding this mutual alignment. And that's when you have a business relationship or you identify there isn't that alignment either now or never. And then you say, great conversation, let's keep in the network. So what does that mean here? Make it a little more practical. If I could just share a quick analogy of what we do and how we describe this to people. It's as if one day, Dennis, I'm going to use you, you're in the middle of my screen, decides to go out to dinner with his significant other or his friend. And his friend says, hey, Dennis, a great restaurant just opened. Oh, we got to try it. Dennis says, well, I'm all in, let's go. Been cooped up with COVID, let's go out for a nice dinner. And you get to this place and you sit down and I say, I'm your waiter. I say, Dennis, what would you like? And you can see where I'm going. And Dennis would say, well, may I see a menu is probably what you would ask. What we do here at BRYTER is we serve almost any type of food based on what you prefer with no menu. As a salesperson, it's very hard to really identify what does that mean for me and do I care? So the answer, large company, small company, Ari, is you have to, especially in this world of what we're doing now, because it is a disruptive technology, is you can't really speak about the technology. I don't think people care too much about how to get there, but it's really understanding the outcomes that they're seeking. And then showing you what I sell on the menu or potentially can do is a better way and a better dish for what you like, if I finish out that analogy. So that's been the joy and the challenge, frankly, as well as we build out the team here, regardless of the size of the company. It's really getting that conversation down right. You have to draw the art of the possibilities and make it tangible. So this is why I say you can't just sell, hey, we do an automation tool. That means nothing. But we can say we provide an automation tool that allows you to customize and ultimately build out your NDA generation process, just making something up. So that might be the way that we identify, that makes sense. That's how I could potentially use it. Now, on the flip side, you can imagine, sometimes we'll do that. I'll use a real life example. So ESG, as many of you may know, is a pretty big topic coming from, even from NASDAQ many years ago. This was already a burgeoning topic. And I'm confident, not just myself, that the regulations are going to get there at some point, that all companies and thereby law firms will be delivering some type of reporting for ESG. There will be a standard. And BRYTER takes a lot of manual components of reporting on ESG and puts it into an application. So you could deliver a board report, or internally your CEO, CFO, everyone sees the same results. Great, all the data comes in, but it's manual. And we could provide a way that you can see this dashboard. And one of my first meetings I had with a law firm was about ESG. And because it is a hot topic, they took the meeting. And we went through this and there was some interest. And at the end of the call, the partner said, this is very interesting, and you should speak with Michael, who is our ESG partner. He gets most of these, and I'll connect you. And we got off the phone and I said to my sales rep, I said, I'm curious, sales rep, what do you think that partner thinks we do? And the answer, of course, is they think we're an ESG tool provider, because we try to share what we do in that example, but there's a perception that's all we do. You see, this is the balance we have to draw out. This is what we're capable of doing, but it's not just that. It's the business problems that solve, and your version or whatever that ESG process, that's manual, that's on email, multiple stakeholders, approvals needed, changing regulations, you name it, all of that stuff. Where it's most effective is raising interest, which might ultimately mean that sounds interesting enough for me to take some time out of my calendar and meet with you and hear more. I would say it largely stops there. I don't think, regardless of what you sell or what audience you're selling to, what their peers do is enough weight, especially today, to say, oh, I should consider buying you, or that's an outsized factor in why they potentially partner with you. I think that just builds credibility at the end of the day. It shows that you've done something for the more customers. Okay, there's probably some viability there. But how will you help me? It just keeps going back to that. My mentor is CRO of ServiceNow, a very large, successful tech company you may have known. And we just had this conversation last week. And I was saying, Kevin, what are you seeing for a company of your size? And there's two things. There's the internal and the external. The internal is how you manage your team and how's that going. I'm generalizing a bit here, but for the most part, each sales rep is a bit of a CEO for their own territory. They're sort of lone wolves to an extent. And really the virtual environment, many organizations, including all the past ones I've been at, there's always some virtual reps. Now, I'm not saying there should be no office need. I'm just saying there's not debilitating their efforts, let's just say. They're able to function remotely. It's a matter of just the overall things that all of us are struggling through the past year and a half. How do we keep the culture, collaboration, and all that virtually? I would say that's the key. We have a number of folks who focus purely on what we would identify as professional services, but largely law firms. And then we have another group of salespeople who focus on the corporate market, directly working with the various types of companies. One day, maybe, for example, we add vertical industries and market cap sizes is a common way you sell SaaS, but we're not there yet. The reason we do it that way is we hear there are two things. I talked about the negative connotation around salespeople. If you boil it down, there are two things you hear from potential customers. One is salespeople don't listen. So you love to talk, but you don't listen. And the second part of that is you don't understand my business. So between not listening and not understanding my business, is very hard for me to trust you and ultimately forget buying anything from you. It's just not a good use of my time. And we found in the legal market, in order to not just listen, but then be able to, based on what we hear, prove that we understand your business, we need folks who have sold to legal firms, understand the business, understand what the innovation teams do versus the partners, the different types of problems each department may have, big firms, small firms, all the different practices. But these are things that are very helpful to know. So that's why we have a subset of experts, if you will, in that space.
Eugene, Shim, thanks to BRYTER, of course, for supporting our series on no code in legal. And I really appreciate your time.